Tell you what.
All right, Nathan, what episode are we on?
I was gonna say
140?
been a minute. So
It's been a minute.
yeah, episode 140. We have a few chapters to wrap up on the book. We've both been busy. We've both been, experiencing quite a bit of change. So
Right.
it's been a whirlwind of a June, I feel like.
It has, and I believe that June, if not May, the end of May had marked 3 years of the Retic Lounge.
Is it? Yeah, I was just thinking about that before we hopped on tonight. I was like, has it been 2 or 3? Like, I can't
3.
totally
Yeah.
remember celebrating the second year, but yeah, I was like, I think it's 3, just like trying to place my timeline correctly.
Right. But yeah, I mean, there's just been stuff going on, and but we're jumping back in the saddle this week with an awesome episode. So I just want to give a shout out to Luke over in Scotland. He's been a Patreon member of ours for a while now, and he just randomly put on our one of our threads on our Discord. We have like a topic suggestion for the episodes, and Luke threw out there, hey, you guys need to get this person on to do a Kurumpa locality spotlight. And of course that clicked with me right away. Nathan and I have been we've had our own things going. So organizing, planning interviews and things has not been at the forefront of our minds. And so Luke did all the legwork for us, and he got me in touch with Jon Edwards, which I believe Jon is also a Patreon member. And he's been supporting us for a while as well. He's not always active on the Discord and everything, but Luke tagged him, and I was like, Jon, yes.
I have a hard enough time being active on the Discord.
Right.
A lot to try to take in and participate in when there's like 100 messages plus a day.
James literally was over here and everything, and I was like, hey, did you see what happened on Discord? And he's like, no, dude, I had to shut my notifications off like a month ago. He's like, my phone was just blowing up left and right from it. I was like, okay, that's
you keep
fair.
Notifications on, it's just going to drain your battery.
Yeah, no, I do not. But yeah, so I do want to just say one thing before we jump in. So we have Jon Edwards. He's going to be coming on. He's bred Karompas. He has done Karompa crosses. And fun little secret fact here, he's going to be doing a live demo for us. He's actually has Karompas that he's going to pull out and show on camera, which I'm excited for, to give you a reference of their size. But yeah, I just, before we jump in, I want to just let everyone know, like, I know that I put out kind of a notice that I was moving out the business side of Live Exotics. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go into detail on why today, because that's not what this episode is, but Nathan and I will have just a one-on-one episode where we talk about the life changes, the things that are happening. I do appreciate everyone that's reached out to me with some people just kind of curious and being nosy, but I mean, still, I'm okay with that. And other people just sending a lot of good sentiments. Nathan, I haven't had a chance to send you screenshots, but a lot of people thanking me and you for the Retic Lounge. That's what sparked their interest into Retics, and they got their first Retics after listening to our podcast, and all of that felt very good. So Nathan and I still are going to be talking about what we're doing with the podcast, how often, all that good stuff. So yeah, we'll
I wouldn't expect it to go away. I just wouldn't expect it to be weekly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're already at that point, and we've been doing it less. And so I just think that that's likely going to be the route. And yeah, we're going to keep the Discord bumping and popping. Shout out to all of our Patreon members. But yeah. Oh, let's do our little sponsorship plug before we bring Jon in.
Get into it.
All right, guys. So I do want to just announce we do have to change this coding here. It is still Reptile Lounge 20. If you guys are looking for the best rodents, use Cold Blooded Cafe. Hands down, the cleanest rodents that you're going to find shipped to your house. 20% off is no longer going to be the deal moving forward with the sponsorships that they have, just because they're dealing with just overhead, and Des is trying to redo the business, and they're popping, they're doing great. But now Reptile Lounge 20 will get you free shipping. So use our code for free shipping. Yeah.
It's on a $200 order, right?
Yeah, I think it's a $200 order. You'll get free shipping. Typically, if it's that high, it's multiple boxes, so you'll save about $60.
Yeah.
So
Not too bad.
no. All right, let's bring Jon in. Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AE Foundry. When it comes to housing your retics, trust me, you're going to want an enclosure that will be just as strong and durable as your reticulated python. The Heartland Reptile Enclosure is next level tough and will outlive you and your retic by several generations. Heartland Reptile Enclosures are designed and manufactured out of powder-coated aluminum to provide the highest quality and longevity available in the reptile enclosure. What makes them even better is they are lighter than your PVC and plastic enclosures out there and are extremely tough. Stop playing around with plastic enclosures for your large constrictors and step up your enclosure game with the Heartland Reptile Enclosure. To inquire about one of these enclosures, speak to Jordan himself at Heartland Reptiles on Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok. Here on TRL, we preach about the importance of using hooks, feeding tongs, and other tools with your reticulated python all the time. Animal Equipment by Stoney not only has all the tools you need for any snake you keep, but they have the absolute best hooks on the market. What sets Animal Equipment by Stoney's hooks apart from the other guys is their polycarbonate hook ends that provide a warm feel that won't disturb or bother your retic, ensuring a positive interaction from the get-go. Since 2008, AE Stoney has been supplying zoos, herpetologists, and other animal professionals with their tools. It's time for you to step your hook game up and buy an AE Stoney hook. To learn more and purchase one of their amazing products, visit aestoney.com.
Jon, nice to have you. Thanks for staying up with us, like I've said. But yeah, great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Just for everyone to gain a little bit more understanding, Jon's over in England. So it's what, about 2:30 in the morning over there?
Actually 3:30.
3:30 in the morning. Yeah. So did you go to bed at like 8 and you woke up at 2:30 or? No,
I actually stayed awake. I did have a little nap, but I stayed awake. I kind of did a bit of snake cleaning, and then I thought I'd probably feel worse if I had a sleep. So yeah, I will catch up a little bit later.
Well, I appreciate that. That was the same thing that Luke did as well. So that means a lot to us. Thank you.
No worries.
All right, let's jump in to just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself. Let's get into the reptile history and all that good stuff that I mean, you have been doing this, keeping exotic species nearly your whole life. So I'm excited we could probably spend 2 hours talking about it. So we're obviously going to condense it, but I would love for you to kind of set the stage for all of the experiences and things that you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess like a lot of people that you have on the Retic Lounge, I kind of started keeping snakes early. So I think I had my first snake when I was about 5 or 6. And at that time in the UK, pretty much nothing captive bred. Most things were wild caught. And at that time, a lot of the animals that you could get in the UK were from elsewhere in Europe. So I started off with an Italian grass snake, which I think I got in 1974. Then I got a garter snake. I think it was just a normal red-sided garter snake, and had that for a while. And then moved through as I got kind of a little bit older, as I got into my sort of teens and things. I had some boa constrictors, yellow rat snakes. Had one of those for a bit. Had
Awesome.
Guyana and red tail boas. Actually had some salvator monitors as well when I was probably about 13, 14. Again, at that point, pretty much nothing was captive bred. These were kind of wild caught babies.
Yeah.
So I had two of those, and then went off. Well, then I kind of was lucky enough to have the opportunity to spend my summers working in some zoos. Got really interested in venomous snakes, and I spent, from when I was about 16 to when I was about 21, I spent my summers working at a zoo that had quite a lot of venomous snakes. Kind of learnt how to handle those. I was thinking back, and they did actually have one Retic. It was probably a Sumatran. It was a big old thing that we never handled. We just fed it and cleaned it out and watered it. And at that point, so we're talking now probably the mid 80s. So again, pretty much, I think Burmese were bred sometimes, but nobody would, certainly in the UK, was breeding Retics at that point. But I did also, around about that time, look after a short while at home a yellow-headed Retic. And it was sweetest nature, which at that point was really unusual because most Retics were not. They were kind of wild caught. They were stressed.
Yeah.
They were kind of hard work, but this one was just sweet and stuck out. I remember that quite clearly. But through my kind of interest in venomous snakes, that led to during when I was doing my BSc, we do like a third year project here as part of your degree. And mine was in the effects of cratoxin, which is an element of cascabel venom. So, and kind of how it affects the neuromuscular junction. And that kind of took me off into a PhD, and I did some work on toxic amino acid. Also did some work on some other venoms as well. Phenutria, I think the Brazilian wandering spider, did some work on that. There was a New Guinea snake as well, did a little bit of work on the venom from that. So you can see that the reptiles took me off in that direction.
No kidding.
But whilst I was kind of doing all of that stuff, I was also keeping reptiles at home. And I guess not so much when I was at college, because obviously, you don't have much space and you're in kind of small rented accommodation and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then I kind of switched gears and then kept blood pythons for quite a while. So I kept red, the bronchosmi.
Were they imports?
Yeah,
oh, I bet
mostly.
They were fun.
They were fun. And some captive bred round about that time. So now we're kind of into the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and more stuff was beginning.
That's when me and Nathan entered the world.
So yeah, kind of round about that time, mostly pythons and boas. I had some Hogs Island boas. Had
Love
some
Hog Island.
Me too.
Beautiful, yeah, fantastic. And I guess the first snakes that I kept that changed color as well, like Retics. I did as well for a short while. I had my first locale, and that was actually a Dominican island boa constrictor. So that was the what they called boa constrictor nucleosus.
Okay.
Like an island form. So that was my first locale. So I guess by the time I was about 20, I'd had a locale boa and looked after a Retic. But then, yeah, various other bits and pieces. I had Papuan pythons for a while, which were, I think, Lucas, we've chatted about those. They were fantastic.
You talk about the Apidoras or the...
Apidora rather than the Papuan carpet.
I'm actually getting one, finally.
Fantastic, yes.
I've been waiting a year for them to finally get imported.
There's been some patience on your part, I'll say that.
Yeah, I've been waiting a while for that, and but anyways, yeah, I can go in.
Oh, mate, they're amazing animals. They're just incredible. And then for about 10 years, I kept pretty much nothing apart from cat snakes. I just got really into cat snakes. I had some green
Huge
cat
eyes.
snakes. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, they're just brilliant animals. So I started off with the green cat snakes and bred those a few times. And then I had, mangroves, dark-headed cat snakes, many spotted cat, loads and loads of cat snakes. Kind of collected those. A few other bits and pieces. I've always had the odd lizard. I had some Timor monitors, which I know is also something, Lucas, that you. I think you're getting some, or you have some.
No. They're high on my. Okay. You talking about the peacocks?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yes, the Offenbergy rather.
Yeah.
Than...
So I actually just talked to Ryan. Those are still going to be coming in. I just had to put a hold on them, but I'm redoing the enclosures up and everything, and just a lot of life changes that happened that I was not ready to just bring in monitors. But now things are starting to settle a bit. So.
But so yeah, mostly snakes, but there's always been the odd lizard here and there. And then I guess retic wise, I'd always had friends that had kind of kept retics, and one of my sort of long-term reptile keeping buddies is a guy called John Griffin, and he was, I think, probably the first guy in the UK to breed Coyotes. So this was around about 2003, around about that point. I mean, I was still kind of crazy on cat snakes then. So he would occasionally bring in animals from Indonesia. I would mostly, get the cat snakes. He would get the some of the super dwarfs and dwarfs, and was kind of lucky enough to breed those. And John moved to Indonesia. So first of all, he worked in Java for a big sort of reptile breeder there.
Is John the one that on Facebook has his profile picture with a Komodo?
Yes.
Okay. I know who John is.
Yes.
Okay.
And then he moved to Bali and was working with Duncan McRae there, who's the guy that the Blue Tree monitors are named after. And I went to visit John I think it was about 2007, and I saw my first purple albino reticulated python. And it just blew my mind. I thought, this is just incredible. I've never seen anything that kind of touches this for color, and that kind of planted a seed, and it took a little while for that seed to kind of germinate and grow, but probably about 3 or 4 years later, pretty much all of the cat snakes are gone, and they've been replaced by reticulated pythons.
Those are definitely husbandry, very different husbandry cages and setups.
Very different cage sizes,
right?
But the one thing that kind of attracted me to retics was the cat snakes were a nightmare to get feeding as babies.
I bet.
Oh, it was just painful.
Did you ever have to go to like lizards and ever have to
tried lizard? Yeah, I tried there's like a lizard scenting thing. Tried that, and that didn't really work. But with the green cat snakes, what I used to do is I used to snip the tails off mice and just assist feed them, and you'd do that for about 4 months until they were big enough to, and then they start taking pinks.
That's a labor of love right there.
So when I first bred retics, and pretty much after they shed, they wallop straight on food. I thought, this is better.
Most of them are ready to go.
So this is much better. So then, kind of got into retics, and my big idea was to get morphs into smaller package. So my big idea was to buy male mainlands and super dwarf females and breed those. And at that time, so now we're sort of round about 2008, 2009, some of the big US breeders were sending stuff to the UK. Bob Clark used to come to the UK quite regularly. He used to stop off in the UK on his way to the big reptile show in Ham. So you could get stuff from Bob Clark. Prehistoric Pets had a deal with a shop here in the UK as well. And to be honest, that was pretty much the only source for captive bred super dwarf and dwarf morphs at that point. The problem was no one really knew much about locales at that point, and it was just a dwarf. Sometimes you got super dwarf percentages. For dwarfs, you seldom did. So, that was kind of what you were
Yeah.
dealing with at that point.
I also
Yeah.
feel like that was probably contributed to a lot of claims, and a lot of it started over here in the U.S., but a lot of claims of like different morphs being dwarfs, right? But
Yes.
they weren't
Yes.
actually sourced on one of the dwarf islands. But like we think of Phantom Stripe and OGS, and they, for the most part, they can be smaller animals, and the imported ones ended up being small, and so they were kind of labeled as dwarf and said they were from Solaire, but that was never accurate. And so I do think that there's a lot of things out there that are labeled kind of like dwarf. They don't have the percentage or anything because it was just kind of one of those just mislabeled unidentified animals.
Definitely. Yeah. So it was kind of tricky then. And you're always sort of learning as you went along. And I guess one of the things that I found, as well as I've sort of bred things to a few generations, is they do seem to get a bit smaller as well. I've got some 50% dwarfs that are a lot smaller than the 50% dwarfs I had 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems that that there's some sort of effect there as well. But I kind of quickly found that female mainlands were not for me. They kind of grew too quick, and
they can get 10 foot in that first year easy.
Yes, yeah, that's what I found actually, and I did. I kind of had some. I had a pair of Voltron caramels, and both of them were round about 8, 9, 10 feet within a year, and I was kind of, and in comparison with the dwarf and super dwarf stuff that I was rearing at the same point, I was kind of thinking, this really isn't for me. I'm just going to try and specialize more on the dwarf and super dwarf stuff. And then I kind of got to hear about these Kurumpas. I had some Madus. So
what year is this around? So you had Madus and started hearing about Kurumpas. What year?
Yeah, so Madus was probably that was probably about 2010, 2011. And
Okay.
at that point, maybe a little bit before, Jon was still in Bali at that point, and he sent me 3 pairs. He sent me 3.3 Madus, which were also Honey Island. I think that's what they were kind of imported as. At
Honey
point.
Island is what I learned, like what they were by Honey Island, and then we started calling them Madu.
And so I had those, and they were kind of different. I mean, the males were very slender, but they weren't that small. I guess they were probably about 7 or 8 feet, the males, but really slender. That they didn't have much body weight at all. The females were definitely kind of chunkier than the males. One of them was horrible. She was a complete nightmare, really difficult to handle. It was a kind of snake that you always did last. You kind of cleaned everything else out, and you just thought, oh, geez, we've got to do this one now.
I have one of those in my garage.
So
I have one female that she's the last one.
See, I find that I do those first, and then it gets me through the rest even faster.
Yeah, maybe I should try that.
That's actually not a bad idea.
But sadly, and I regret it to this day. I sold a pair of those Madus pretty soon after I imported them, knowing that 2 pairs was kind of enough. But then sold the other 2 pairs probably 2 or 3 years later, and I kind of regretted it. But you sort of think, well, yeah, that's fair. I'm sure they'll turn up, or I'll be able to get them again. But of course, although it's obviously very different from the US, where there's complete blanket ban, it is much more difficult now to bring animals in, and so that is a kind of a bit of a regret. But yeah, as far as the Karompas, the story there is there was a guy who I got to know. I sold him some cat snakes, and then he sort of started keeping retics, and he bred this form called the Toffee Albino, and I bought some from him, and kind of kept in touch with him. We kind of did various projects and things together. And then he told me about a guy in the UK that was bringing in a shipment of Karompas, and started telling me that, this was the smallest locale. And I think there were 10 came in on this shipment. So this was in 2015. It was a guy called James Coppen who ran Imperial Retics here in the UK and did quite a lot of kind of world firsts. Wasn't really into the super dwarfs at all. He was much more of kind of a mainland guy and doing the morphs. Really nice guy. I met him. And he brought in from Indonesia these 10 Karompas, but they were mostly males. I think there was only 2 females in the shipment, something like that. And
That's convenient.
Well, yeah, and yeah, kind of quite a good story with them as well. Because so I went across. Dave Lowe had bought quite a few of these Kurumpas. I think maybe 4 or 5 of them. So I went across, and I think I had a choice of 2 males. So I picked up a male, kind of hoping to pick up a female later on, knowing that there was a few on the shipment. I then got another male from the same shipment that I swapped for some double het babies, dwarf het toffee, het albino babies that I bred. And then I had 2 males for about 2 years. Was looking for a female, and they just weren't coming up. And then Dave sent me a message and said, look, I'm going to be emigrating to New Zealand. I'm going to be selling all of my snakes. And he sent me this great big long list, and he had a fantastic collection, and said, would you be interested? And I kind of said, well, I haven't got the money, and to be honest, I haven't got the time, but I saw the female Karompa on there, and I said, pretty much name your price. Out of this great big long list of sort of 20, and it was real cutting edge morphs and stuff, but just the Karompa, Dave, the Karompa.
I tell people all the time, if you want to get your hands on a locality animal, a locality retic, especially a female, when one comes across your lap, that might be the only chance in the next 5 years that you have to get one.
Yes.
It seems like you jumped on the ticket.
I did. And I'd been waiting for, a couple of years and just kind of keeping an eye out on things. And I knew, as I say, these were all from the from this one shipment that had come in. So this was probably about 2017 that Dave emigrated to New Zealand, and he's over there still and working in a zoo with reptiles, doing all these fantastic conservation projects as well. So he's still very much in the reptile game, but not the retic game. And so I think when I got the female, she was probably round about the sort of 5 foot mark. So she was probably a youngish animal, whereas I guess I had the males a couple of years at that point, and they'd never really grown. They just stayed small. So that kind of the next step was getting the female up to size, which I did, pretty slowly over the next couple of years. And then in 2019 I was lucky enough to breed them, and I've kind of done it the same way each time, because I have these 2 males, and I just kind of cycle them in with the females. So I put one male in for a couple of weeks, and then take that one out and put the other male in for a couple of weeks. So the 3 times I've bred them, I don't actually know which male is the sire. I don't know, but it not really bothered me, because, as I say, they came from the same shipment. So, it's not really been kind of a concern. But in terms of the conditioning and things, I don't really treat them any differently from any of the other retics. I call nighttime drops kind of towards the end of the summer here. So kind of, getting into September, I'll start dropping the nighttime temperatures. When we do get the colder nights, that's when you quite often see the males start sort of combating a bit. But to be honest with the Karompas, the males are pretty easy going. You don't really see them, they're not like the morphs I keep, where the males are sort of kind of thrashing around, and you really know when they're kind of in breeding mode. I don't really notice it so much with these.
Before we get into the breeding aspect of them, I want Nathan, I'm having him pull up a map of where Karompa Island is in the island, and so he'll bring that over because I wanted to talk about just like, and Nathan, if you can even zoom out a little so we can see where the main, like where Jampea is. So yeah, so zooming in and on the top left, you should see, is that Solaire? I want to say.
Yeah, so we have Sulawesi and Indonesia to the north, Bantang Island range, so the Solaire Island chain to the left.
Yeah, so that big island on the top left is the island of Solaire, and those are the Solaire island chains. But yeah, I mean Kurumpa. So, and one thing that I do want to distinguish and kind of talk about right here is, I mean, first off, Kalatoa retics are already small animals in terms of retics, and then, you know, it makes sense that the Kurumpas could potentially be smaller than Kalatoas based off of island size, and just talking about just, you know, the dwarfism that happens. You know,
and it's like a tenth of the size, if that, of Kalatoa.
Exactly. Now, the biggest thing for me, right, is because of pronunciation, how things are spelled, how we pronounce things and everything. I've always wondered if maybe some of these Kurumpas are actually Kurumpas, or if they're Kurumpas, right? We don't know. But yeah, I wanted to pull up the size so that you guys can get a reference. Like Kalatoa is a tiny island, and it looks vast and huge next to Kurumpa. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So let me ask you this, John. When we talk about the phenotype, right, the visual expression that Kurumpas tend to carry, when we talk about superdwarfs localities in general, Kalatoa, Madu, Kurumpa, we can even, if you want to, you know, put Kaiwati in there even a little bit, but they're known for having a broken up neck pattern, right?
Yep.
And, you know, thinner blacks than the mainland stuff. But do you see? So I tend to think in the US, we have a generalized idea of like what a Madu looks like, what a Kurumpa looks like. And the way that we do that is just by the very limited gene pool that we have here in the US.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure the phenotypes are so different on the island. And like you'll find, I always tell people, you can find a Kalatoa that's as busy, if not busier than a Kurumpa. You can find a Kurumpa that's got more perfect diamonds than a Madu. And it just, you never, I don't like to like have a catch all for describing how they look, but I'm curious what the Kurumpas look like over there, the ones that you're working with.
Definitely. So I think I mean, I've seen some of the reach out reptiles, you know, videos that Garrett's done as well. And I think definitely that kind of idea of the front third of the snake being different from the second third and towards the tail, the real busy kind of neck pattern and things. Absolutely, I can kind of see that. Yeah, and I think, you know, as I kind of come on to that can make for some really nice morphs as well. You know, just that sort of really deep sort of pattern. I mean, so I have the ones that I've bred. I've got the 2.1. I've currently got 2 holdbacks from 2023, and they're a little bit different from the adults in that they've got quite a bit more yellow and gold kind of coloring in them. I don't think mine have got much in the way of anery. I know that there are, definitely some anery Kurumpas. There's a guy in Poland who's got an unbelievable anery Kurumpa. I've seen some pictures of it, and it's just out of this world. So I think mine are kind of a little bit different in that they're certainly the F1s that I've produced seem to have a little bit more gold and a bit more sort of coloring in them. You know, they don't really have a sort of real anery look to them. The 2 males are pretty similar in their sort of patterning. They all have this very intense, sort of very heavily patterned sort of front third, and then it goes to a more sort of typical retic patterns. They do have this sort of the saddles are quite small, and that laterally that some nice white markings and things as well. So I think they're broadly similar from the videos and things that I've seen.
Okay, cool.
Of the Kurumpas, and also in Glenn's book, there's a couple of pictures of my Kurumpas alongside those US ones. So I think they're pretty, pretty similar. And I think round about the same time that they came in, probably round about the same time, sort of maybe 2014, 2015 there. Yeah. But my female Karompa she's not that much smaller than the other super dwarfs I've kept now, particularly, I mean, she's had 3 clutches, and I've had her for 10 years, and she was probably 3 or 4 when, at least when I got her. She's probably 8 feet, maybe a bit more now, but it's the males that are really noticeably smaller than the other locales that I've kept.
Yeah. Have you kept any male Kalatoas? I have a wild caught Kalatoa here. He's probably close to 20 years old now. But he's about 8 foot long. Yeah. And still pretty slender, but I think I know what you're talking about with that super lean look. I mean, my Kalatoa males that I'm raising, my F1s, they're almost 4 years old, and they're still like pencil thin.
Shall I dig out I have one of the males here.
Oh, it's not you didn't want to take the female out for us? That would have been a fun show.
So here we go. So this is, I've had him 10 years, this snake.
Oh my gosh. You've had him 10 years?
10 years. Yeah, 2015 I got these. And he doesn't eat anything bigger than a wiener rat. So this is one of the males that's bred. And they've always been, that they like to get away, but they don't strike. They are pretty chilled out for a wild caught snake.
They're pretty. And I would say I talked to Daniel Solis, and he's made some comments before, but he's gone to Solaire Island and trying to get a hold of those animals. They strike, they bite, but he said every super dwarf island he visited, he hasn't had a single one bite him.
Yes, yeah. The female is a bit more. She's a bit more flighty, but both males are kind of pretty easygoing. But I know the lighting's not great here, so you're not really going to see too much in the way of patterning.
That's okay, though.
I just thought it would be good to see. I mean, this is infinitely smaller than the Madu imports that I had. They were probably getting 1.5 times this length and certainly fatter. I did have one of these boys, not this one, it was the other one. We had a bit of an accident where I was cleaning him out, and he kind of got out of his cage and he ate, I think it was about 4 small rats, and he could barely move. He was like just a huge, big fat sausage. He certainly hasn't grown.
That's so crazy.
Just kind of stayed like this. But yeah, they are just very, very, very sort of small.
I will say that I've seen small retics. I've seen small locality retics, and for some reason, like you holding that 10-year-old Kurumpa, that is mind-boggling to me. That's a true. So I like to tell people super dwarfs are not small snakes, because the reality of it is they're not. They're still reticulated pythons. I'm not going to lie. That's a small snake.
Yeah.
That's
when I kind of say to people, if people say how big are the males, and I say, well, kind of like a pine snake, and that's probably about a kind of a pine snake size snake, isn't it? It's bigger than a corn snake,
right?
It's kind of a pine snake size snake.
Yeah, but, it's that's really impressive. You said you had other snakes.
I do, yeah. So I've been lucky enough, because I've got the 2.1 from the same shipment. I've never wanted to cross them into my morphs. I kind of thought, well, I just want to keep these pure. But there was a guy here in the UK called Jason Peacock who's bred some fantastic animals, really good guy. And he had a female Karompa and couldn't get hold of a male. So he bred a 75% purple to it. I think it maybe has some anery in it as well. So I've got a
75%. What was it? Kurumpa?
Don't know. I think it was maybe.
I know he did a lot of Kalatoa.
Yeah,
crosses.
I think it was a Kalatoa. So I've got an 87.5% super dwarf, so 50% Karompa het purple, and I've used her for the last 3 years to produce some babies, and she produces really, really little eggs. They're not much bigger. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to.
Do you weigh them?
Weigh all of my eggs and I weigh all of the babies.
I do too, especially with my. Well, I only do it with my pure locality pairings, but I have weights on every single egg from every locality pairing I've done.
And I'm kind of interested as well because I, with the morphs, I breed the same male to different females, and the other way around. So kind of just been sort of collecting data, which I don't know, at some point I'll maybe do something with it. But it's what I have found is that it seems to be, I mean, I don't do, I don't have mainland females. So most of my breedings are with a female super dwarf or dwarf. And when I use different males, it doesn't seem to make an awful lot of difference in terms of the egg and the hatchling weights. It seems to be very much driven by the kind of the female size and maybe the female percentage. So I've kind of got here. This one this was one that was produced by the female from Jason. So the 87.5%, 50% Kurumpa. So this little fella's, whoops, it's just going to be a bit hairy.
Gotcha.
He did. So this little fella here is he's 43.5% super dwarf, so 25% Kurumpa. His dad's a mainland sunfire falchion.
So you guys are already at 75% Karompa visual albinos?
No, so he's 43.
43. Okay.
Yeah, 43.75.
Okay, I was about to be mind blown.
But his dad is as I say, is a mainland sunfire falchion. So this is, I'm not sure whether you have these guys in the States. This is an amaretto. So it's
we don't have falchion.
Yeah, so it's a compound heterozygote of purple and falchion, but it just makes really, really nice sort of pretty albinos. And I think these, when they hatched, I've got its little weight written down here.
We just did the book club on all the albinos, so I'm up to date and up to knowledge with my albino stuff.
So this fellow was 70 grams when he hatched, and the baby Kurumpas around about somewhere between, I think they've ranged from about 38 up to about 55, 60 grams, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, a little bit bigger, but I'm not sure whether you can see, but you can. It's got sort of some of the sort of the intense speckling and things on its neck here. But yeah, I think that they're really good for sort of breeding into morphs with that, intense colouring, and also the always forget what they're called, like these little porthole things as well, tend to show up sort of quite nicely on here. I've also got one that's a 2-year-old female that's from the same 87.5% that came from Jason. She's a lavender het orange ghost stripe, and she's really pretty. There's a guy actually here in the UK called Joe who's got her brother, and he's posts lots and lots of pictures of. Actually, she shows a bit better the neck pattern that I was talking about. So she's 2. This one, can you see the?
Oh yeah, the blushing that's in the yellow. I mean,
yes.
there's 2 different yellow tones on that snake.
And the just the sort of the markings, like the intense speckling around the neck. So yeah, she's one of the nicest albinos I produced. Really, really nice looking, and yeah, pretty small for a 2-year-old. I think she was round about the same weight when she hatched.
I think everyone feels the same way about albino retics. It's really hard to beat. I mean,
Yeah.
the deep purples and the orange and the yellows. Albino retics were. I mean, when I see a picture of a nice albino, it always just like,
Yes.
it blows me away. I want to talk a little bit about your husbandry parameters, and specifically talking about like the Kurumpas, because for me, I've bred some different localities and have found that certain localities do better with lower temperatures. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that from you, but talking about the Karompas, and then how does it differ for the other stuff that you've bred, and I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I think, and actually, I've got you to thank, Lucas, because you suggested incubating a bit lower for the Karompas, and that really helped, because my first clutch, I only hatched 4. I think I had about 12 eggs and only hatched 4. Of that 4, I know, one went to Poland. There's a guy there who breeds Karompas, and he uses maternal incubation, which is quite interesting. I think he's bred them 2, maybe 3 times. And the other 3 are still in the UK. They were, a guy bought them from me, and I think he sold them on to a guy called Con up in Cumbria. And then the next time I bred them, I think I'm pretty sure that was a Partho clutch, because they were all females. They've done fine. As I say, I've got 2 holdbacks from that clutch, and they're 2 years old. They seem sort of pretty hearty. And then in 2024, so yeah, last year, I had a good clutch of eggs. I think they were about 18, 20. And yeah, based on your suggestion, I incubated them a little bit cooler, did them round about sort of 86, whereas I normally do a little bit hotter than that. And
I'm going to experiment. People are going to think I'm crazy, but someday I will experiment with a clutch of eggs at 84 degrees. They'll probably go 105 days, but I guarantee you they'll hatch.
Yeah, and it did make a difference. I guess the Partho clutch, maybe that's a bad comparator, because perhaps that wasn't great anyway. But certainly the first, so the 2019 clutch, it was really disappointing, because the eggs looked good, but they just kind of failed throughout incubation. It wasn't like normally you get some that kind of fail early on, and from that point onwards you're kind of good. But the ones last year, so I think I had about 18 that hatched last year. And to be honest, as babies, they're really easy to rear, easier than some of the morphs. I think because they're so little, that they don't absorb, they're not chubby like
they don't come out with like the fat yolk bellies.
Exactly.
They come out lean and ready to go.
They are, absolutely. And I think probably the first time I tried to feed them, all bar one fed. It was an absolute dream. It was just bang, 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 bang. It was really easy.
I would say every MR Jampianis locality that I have bred have all been phenomenal eaters. I've only had difficult feeders when it comes to when I start messing with morph stuff.
Yes. And that's certainly been my experience. What I also did last year as well was I kept the Karompas a little bit cooler, so I kind of put them in racks that were lower down in my reptile room, so they were just naturally a little bit cooler than elsewhere. And they
What do you keep your reptile room at?
I'm not completely ambient, so but it is pretty hot, because I've got lizards in there, so I've got
heat lamps like to.
Yeah, so I've got rhino iguanas, Fiji iguanas, and tree monitors in there. So there's quite a bit of heat. Also, I've got solar, and the digital, the DC AC converter is in the reptile room, so that biffs out a little bit.
Produce some heat too,
yeah. So it's kind of it does vary a bit, but I can I guess the important thing is I can get it cooler for the males at night. The other thing I tend to do is I keep my males in the lower cages rather than the females a bit higher, because that's where I can cool things more effectively on the floor. And that's certainly with the little male Karompas. They're on cages lower down within the room, and that seems to work pretty well.
Awesome.
It just means it's that little bit cooler down there.
Do you run a heat source or a hotspot on them 24/7?
No, I most of the I use a stat that's got like nighttime drops on the Viv, so it is always a little bit cooler
Cool.
in there, so they can cool down. But I mean, it doesn't get much below 70. I mean, at the moment it's actually a bit of a heat wave here in the UK. So I think when I was in the Reptile room, it was about 75 at the moment in there. So it's kind of ambient, but the cages do have infrared heaters. I always use, and have done for quite a long time, 5% UV for all of my retics.
Awesome.
Not the babies. The babies are in tubs, but anything that's over a couple of years old is in a Viv with a 5% UV.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. I don't. There's not a lot of retic people that are doing that.
No. Yeah, I guess it's partly because I keep lizards as well, and I just I've always got some knocking around, and they look good under them, and they seem to enjoy it. So it kind of, why not?
Yeah, I mean, if you have the bulbs laying around, and I mean, it's not that much work to install another something to mount for it. So no, I mean, I think it's pretty awesome reading through Glenn's book and just kind of his take and viewpoint of where we should be getting in the husbandry perspective and everything. And when we went over heating and lighting, that chapter that was super complex, I think it's the way to move forward. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do it right away or anything, but I think people should be curious and experiment and try it.
Definitely. And if it's not going to hurt them, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you can absolutely blast them with too much UV, but like you just do a little bit of research and it's not hard to find. Yeah. It's not hard to find the sweet spot. But yeah, so let's talk about the cycling process. You mentioned that you cycled for your Kurumpas, that you cycled the two males in and out and take them out every couple weeks. What has worked for you for getting those females to cycle? Because I know a lot of people have struggled historically with getting Kurumpas, Madus, and even some Kalatoas like the super dwarfs. Sometimes females have, especially the wild caught animals. Wild caught super dwarfs are notorious for being difficult breeders.
I guess, and remember with this, for me, this is n equals 1. But I think I was probably quite lucky in that she was quite a young snake when I got her. She was say Dave had her probably for a couple of years before I did, so she was probably only about 3 or 4 feet when she was imported. When I got her, she was maybe a little bit bigger, probably about the same size as the male that I've shown you, maybe a little bit bigger. So I think she was probably acclimated more easily being a slightly younger snake, and certainly one that had never bred in the wild, because she was nowhere near big enough. She's not been that difficult, to be honest. I mean, it just kind of the normal stuff. I tend to kind of feed, not crazy heavy, not as heavy as I think some people do, but through the summer I'll tend to feed more because they seem to want more. And I didn't really do anything that much different, just sort of fed her up, and then coming into what for me here is normally the breeding season, so sort of into autumn, fall time. Then as the nighttime temperatures drop, I stop feeding the males, and then put the males in with the females. I've never bothered too much about the I know a lot of people take a lot of store in, when the female stops feeding, then they'll only put the male in at that point. I tend not to do that. I'll just kind of try and see what happens, and then take the male out for a bit, and then kind of try again. So nothing particularly kind of out of the ordinary
Okay. Good to
in
know.
comparison. But as I say, I do. In my mind, I think in some ways, if you've got a male that's ready to breed, it can almost sort of spur the female on. Once they start trying to mate with the female, then it could perhaps push things on.
No, I've done that in the past where I want a female to start cycling, and I'll throw a male in there after a couple days after she eats, right? Because obviously you just want to be careful with food response and stuff. And
Yes. Yeah.
and sometimes I'll have a male spur, right? But like the female's not receptive, but like 2 months later, after a couple more introductions, the female starts to cycle and starts to go through it. And I think a lot of people, I was even taught getting into this, like, wait until the female's off of food, right? And that's if you're food cycling. And I think for new breeders, that's an easy fail-safe option to use to make sure that you don't have a bad experience with the pairing process and all that stuff. But I personally believe like the professional way is like observation and palpating, like really like understanding your snake and learning how to palpate and learning how to read differences. So that way you can, early introductions, I have people tell me all the time that they're pointless. And I'm like, they're not.
No, I agree with you. I think that, that they can certainly make a difference. And I think as well that if you've got a few different males that are in, kind of breeding mode. I mean, when I clean out, I'll tend to take a male out and use the same, kind of bin or tub or whatever. And, I'm sure that gets them a bit fired up because they're smelling the other males that's just been in there a little bit before.
I've put some males in holding tubs before, and I've been able to see the lid of the tub push up because it's arching.
So I think that probably doesn't do any harm. It just kind of gets them a little bit fired up. I mean, it's funny with as I mentioned, I keep Fiji iguanas, and now they're in cages which can kind of see each other, and you get the males displaying at each other, which is pretty cool. And that seems to have sort of spurred things on because I keep them paired kind of year round, but I think suddenly the threat of another male is beginning to sort of spur things on a little bit. I guess they kind of think, oh well, we're kind of good here. I'm the sole male around here, and then all of a sudden there's another one that they see, and they're like, oh geez.
There may be two panes of glass between us, but I see you.
Yeah, no, my males, when they get testy like that and everything, taking them out is fine. It's when I put them back in their enclosure is where they love to come at me.
Yeah, the walk ball goes flying, and all of the stuff that you've carefully arranged is all up in the air and all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've had one be fine when I took him out and put him back in, huge water bowl in the enclosure, and I'm cleaning other stuff and just hear the water bowl like almost flip. It's insane.
Yeah. Oh, geez, I'm gonna have to sort this out now.
Jon, do you remember? Do you have an idea in your head, or do you have access to finding out on like what was the average? Well, I guess what was the average or the median egg weight for Karompa localities, and or if you remember the largest Karompa egg and smallest?
Yeah, I think roughly they're round about. So the eggs are kind of just around about the 100-gram mark, and I know in Glenn's book I provided him with some numbers I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's round about the 100-gram mark, and that's been consistent, with the 3 clutches, and on average, the babies are around about half that. I mean, there have been some that have been smaller, some that have been round about, sort of 37, 38 grams up to, sort of the, I guess, 60 or so.
For the eggs of the babies?
The babies, around about. The eggs, round about the 100-gram mark, maybe a little bit more. And the babies, roughly half that, and that's what I've kind of found with the morph eggs and stuff as well, that the babies are often kind of round about, because I tend to weigh the eggs as soon as they're laid rather than once they've kind of got, because they can absorb so much water that from the
Mm-hmm.
incubation medium and stuff. So yeah, kind of round about that.
Yeah, my average Kalatoa egg weight is 94 grams, and my average Kaiwati egg weight was 102 grams.
Yeah, so it's kind of round about
Around
that
there.
ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the smallest hatchling. Actually, I just hatched the smallest hatchlings I ever had, but prior to that, I'm gonna get weights on them after they had their first shed. But prior to that, I think the lightest hatchling that I've hatched out was a Kalatoa at 38 grams.
Yeah. Funnily enough, that little amaretto, sunflower amaretto I showed you, I had some twins from that litter, and they were 37 grams each.
I didn't weigh
That's tiny.
I didn't weigh the twin Kaiwatis.
You should do. Yeah.
I had twin Kaiwatis, and they were so small, and I didn't weigh them. My scale broke.
Yeah, and these were they're 37, 38 grams. I'll send you some pictures of those, because you can kind of put them on your hand. They're absolutely tiny. I kind of shared some of the pictures with some of the kind of Retic guys here in the UK, and I think some of them were saying, twins don't do so well, but both of these are feeding voluntarily. They're eating.
The twins I had did amazing. These are the new super dwarfs that I just hatched. That I have a Japanese dollar. Let me see if I can try to focus the size.
Jeez, that's tiny. Yeah. I did a few years ago, I hatched a 87.5% het purple at 38 grams, and that went on. A friend of mine, a guy called Chris Winter, bought that from me, and it just bred it actually this year, and that grew to like a blood python shaped super dwarf, real chunky thing.
That's not something I'd expect.
Yeah. Over a long time. She must be, I don't know, maybe about 10 now. But yeah, she did kind of catch up with her. I had her sister for a while as well. She did kind of catch up over time. But it was interesting as well, because I think in Glenn's book, sort of saying about the, how are you ever going to tell kind of the growth capacity of a super dwarf versus a mainland and things. But as kind of somebody pointed out, it's you just can't do it, because you're never going to be able to, unless you massively underfeed a mainland, just because the super dwarfs are so much smaller when they start off.
Yeah.
It's maybe over a long time.
Yeah. For me, the frustrating thing is too many people get caught up on length.
Yes.
Too many people get caught up on length, because the biggest difference between a mainland and a super dwarf is not the length; it's the
bulk.
Yeah.
I was like, we're rounding back to an OG clip right here, Lucas.
Oh man, this is 2 years ago. We were talking about this.
I won't say my usual line. I'll save you.
But yeah, no, I think that we really underestimate the size of reticulated pythons based off of weight. Weight's important.
Yes.
And a super dwarf, an overfed super dwarf to an underfed mainland, the mainland is still going to weigh a lot more, because they are just thicker bodied animals.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And I as I say, I've got a few mainland males now, and when was it? I think it was February last year. I actually from John Griffin got a wild caught Retic ghost male, and that's the first big mainland male I've had in quite a long time. And that was probably quite an old animal, and that was a fair sized beast, and certainly way thicker than any of the other males I've had here, and not the easiest of snakes either.
No.
A bit of an attitude on him, that one.
Right. So your first clutch of Karompas was 2019, you said?
Yeah. So I think it was they were laid January 2019 and hatched April 2019. So those are there were 4 from that clutch. One went to Poland. I took it across to Europe, and a guy from Poland picked that up. And the other 3, I know where they are. They're still here in the UK.
You ever regret it? Do you ever regret selling them?
A little, yeah. I think, I mean, one thing now that I've got two females held back from the 23 clutch, and I haven't got. I would like a young, unrelated male to kind of, ensure that I've got, enough moving forward. I guess because I'm pretty sure that the two females from that 23 clutch are. It was a Partho clutch, so I wouldn't be reluctant to kind of put them to the old males I've got, because I don't think they're related, but it would still be good to get some completely unrelated blood. I mean, we do occasionally, you see, every year or so, there's some wild caught Kurumpas that
Really?
are brought into the UK.
What does it take to import them to the UK? Because I know over in recent years it's gotten a lot harder.
Yeah, you were saying that you just filled out some paperwork, so I'm curious what that process is like.
So I was just chatting to Nathan a little bit earlier on. So I'm kind of working with John Griffin, and we're looking to bring in a shipment from Indonesia, because he's still got lots of contacts there, as does his boss. So we're looking to bring over. Hopefully some captive bred ones there, because I think a lot of people don't realize that there is quite a lot of animals that are bred in Indonesia. When I visited John in Bali, he had a room full of house snakes, and they were for the local market. There's a big market for reptiles in Indonesia. They have big shows and things. They breed lots of iguanas. Yeah. John had loads of tegus there, loads that were...
Dan Maliri, DM Exotics, he has a place in Malaysia, and he goes to Indonesia, and he's there all the time, and he's done some YouTube videos of the reptile shows over there, and they are
amazing.
They're massive. They're amazing, and they have so many amazing animals.
Yes. Yeah, all the croc monitors and stuff, and
insane.
Not just Indonesian stuff. They're breeding other animals there as well. Panther chameleons and all sorts. So yeah, we're looking to do that. In the UK, it's become a lot more difficult since Brexit. So I mentioned that taking the animals in 2019 to a guy in Poland. I could just take them. I just put them in the car and took them, and that was all fine. Now we need CITES paperwork to take stuff into Europe. So it's just got a lot more complicated and more expensive. I mean,
that's all it is they just want money for the things that we're doing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's just,
they don't care about the preservation, conservation. It's just, it's a way to tax us.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So it has become sort of more complicated, but there are, a few, sort of large reptile dealers here in the UK that will bring in shipments from Indonesia. But to be honest, there's not a huge market for even local retics here. So sometimes you see them on lists for a little while. I mean, there was, I think just last year, that there was a male Karompa that came up, but again it was a wild caught one. So I kind of thought, well, it's probably going to take me a couple of years to acclimate it, and I've already got two that are well acclimated, and who knows, this one that I'm getting could be as old or even older than the two that I've got. So it just didn't seem like a good proposition. They are bred in Europe. I think, say, there's the guy in Poland that uses some maternal incubation. He's bred them at least twice, and say he's got this stunning anery. I'm not normally a big fan of anery, but I'm a big fan of this one. It's just beautiful.
There are certain aneries that just they look really nice.
This, is just, and I did see actually there was a picture maybe on the Retic Nation last year of supposedly a wild caught one, another really sort of pale white one. So that there are some around in Europe. In mainland Europe, there's a much bigger market for the locales. So of the clutch I produced last year, I sold a few in the UK, but 10 went to Europe, and they all sold much more quickly there. And I'm lucky enough to, have John Griffin in Holland, and we worked together. I exported them to him, and he sold them for me. We're gonna. So at the moment we've got I think just today we've got all of the CITES paperwork through. So now we're going to kind of figure out and see what's available in Indonesia, speak to some people here, and see what they may want, and then look to bring it in. So it will come to Jon, and then we'll kind of sort it out. Have to sort out the paperwork then to import it from Holland into the UK, and a couple of Papuan pythons as well. We're bringing in because between Jon and myself, we've just bought 1.2 long-term captive Papuans. So we'd like to get some more males.
Great. So there's not enough people that have been able to successfully breed them.
No, not at all. No, I mean, I don't know of anyone in the UK that's done it. When I kept them years ago, I wrote a thing for a magazine, and I was in touch with a guy in Oklahoma who I think had bred them. Not Bob Clark, it was somebody else. And I think there was a zoo at that point as well that had bred them. But yeah, you just don't see them.
No, to my knowledge, there's one person in Canada, and maybe there's one for sure, maybe two people in the US that have.
Yeah. Because they used to be relatively common as wild caught. You used to see them fairly often. The ones I got were, they weren't out of the usual at that point.
Yeah. So one of the last things I want to talk about in regards to Karompa is we were talking a little bit about the phenotype of them, busy, complex, chaotic patterns. I want to hear from you. I don't know how much you know about all the different morphs and everything, but I'm curious, and Nathan, I want to hear from you as well on this. What morph projects would be elevated and enhanced by taking a Karompa to it? I think that we've missed this on other locality spotlights, but I want to help listeners start to get into the mindset of like breeding for great phenotypic expression and not just pairing to make snakes.
Okay, I have some ideas.
Jon, we'll let you lead. What morphs do you think complement Kurumpa really well?
Yeah, so the ones that I've done so far. So I've done three pairings with the female I mentioned from Jason. So I did to a visual orange ghost stripe that luckily enough also turned out to be het albino, which produced the the lavender het OGS. That was a really good pairing. Last year I did the same snake to a 62.5% sunfire lavender, and that produced some really nice animals. I don't think they were quite as nice as the OGS stuff. Maybe perhaps because the sunfire takes out strips out some of the the chaotic patterning. I mean, it's a kind of a bit of a pattern reducer as well as a color enhancer, I guess.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing about sunfires. It does two different things. Yeah.
So those, I mean, I'd like maybe some platinum in there as well. As I say, I was saying I'm kind of a bit of I have simple tastes. I like bright, shiny things. And
bright and shiny. Yeah.
Bright and shiny is what I go for. So, sunfires, OGS, that's kind of my thing. That would be my thought, but not anything that's like Motley or Golden Child. Anything that is a pattern reducer, you're clashing.
You're clashing, exactly.
Yeah, I wouldn't think Tiger, Motley,
no,
Golden Child, anything like that's a little too overpowering.
I would think I think Tiger would look cool because I think Tiger would I think it would be a dirty tiger. It would have so much black speckling and flecking. It would look very it would look almost tribal like. I don't know. I think that because I've seen some crazy busy pattern tigers before that look really, now it doesn't look like a classic beautiful tiger, but it still it tricks it out in a way that's a little, I'd be interested for someone to do a high percentage, 75% Karompa tiger and see what the results are. But I would agree. I think that pattern reducers, but before I answer, Nathan, what would you enhance with Karompa?
My mind, if we're just going to enhance, is probably the first thing I would do is probably platinum.
Okay.
I think that would be fun to see some platinum Karompas. I think it would just brighten everything up. And then if we were to really play with pattern, I would probably choose anthrax.
Anthrax.
Yeah,
That'd be really cool.
that's good. Cool. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would look amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've already seen this happen, but marble I think is the best and complete dominant for Karompa.
That's where my mind kind of went for a second, but then I was like, no, I'd probably rather see what Anthrax would do to it before
me too.
marble.
Yeah, I think Anthrax is good. I like marble in there. I do think that I like the idea of platinum by brightening it up. What I don't like seeing with Kalatoa platinums is it basically eliminates any black. Like the black starts to become non-existent. So you end up with like a bright yellow animal, but there's not a lot of contrast in it. And the contrast starts to looks almost a little more silver. But some people like that palette of platinum. For me, I kind of like the mainland version of like platinum or lemon glow that has the thick blacks and like the very bright yellow color. I'm trying to think what else would be good with it. I think Aztec. I think Aztec Karompas would be pretty cool.
Yeah, they would be nice.
Yeah, I think Aztecs are busy enough, but also clean up a little bit. I would be really interested to see what an Aztec Karompa looks like.
I think to Nathan's suggestion about the platinum, as well as I kind of mentioned, the F1 holdbacks that I've got, they have a lot of gold in them. So I think if you could push that even more, I think that would be really special. As long as you say, you're not kind of losing any of the deep dark colors as well. So you're kind of enhancing the yellow, but not detracting on anything else. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, I think the OGS stuff is a great start, and just in terms of brightening everything up.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I have the Solayer head OGS in my garage, and they're phenomenal. I cannot wait to see that project through and produce Solayer OGS Sunfires, and
they would be stunning. I've just seen there's somebody that's hatched some Sunfire OGS here in the UK, and they're really, really, really bright. I do have I've got, last year I was lucky enough to breed some albino OGS, and if you could get that with the Karompas, and I guess that this one here is on the way to that being a het OGS, I think they'd look really cool as well, as long as the OGS didn't strip out too much of the patterning, which is what you want to keep.
Yeah. It was, I appreciate all the information about the Karompas and your experience with them. I'd like to hear that, like, they are, in your experience, significantly smaller, at least compared to like the Madu body type, right? I found that was like my biggest takeaway that I found very cool. And then obviously seeing a 10-year-old male right there that literally looks like a bull snake or a pine snake is, because again, I kind of laugh when people tell people that, like, hey, your super dwarf's going to be as big as a colubrid. And it's like, it's not, because I will say 9 out of 10 times it's not, but there are animals that stay small.
Yeah. And I must admit, I don't have any holdback males, so I don't know whether the F1s are going to be, the F1 males are as small as, these wild caught ones. I don't know that. I guess I can ask some of the people that have bought them from me. But it would be kind of interesting to see. How about in the US? I mean, I've seen some of the pictures of the males and things there. They look pretty small, but maybe not quite as.
The Kurumpas here are real small. Now that there's some F1s, we're starting to see just kind of like to me, the F1s that I've seen, they're showing the same growth patterns as Kalatoas. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, I tell people my opinion is, we see mainlands getting smaller and we see super dwarfs getting larger. And
yes.
I think the common denominator with those two things is food.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening. It might take a very long time, but I mean, in theory, right? If like insular dwarfism, in theory, can be reversed.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It might take a long time, but yeah. Nate, you got any other questions, or John, anything else that you wanted to touch on?
just what's kept you so focused on Karompa throughout the years? I mean, obviously size is a big determining factor, but
Yeah,
what's drawn
I
you so
guess.
close into them?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they're the only locale that I've kept for any length of time. I would like to kind of get some others. I think partly just because the ones that I've hatched, they have had a little bit more colouring than some of the other super dwarfs I've had. As I say,
Mhm.
mine the ones I have here I probably don't have much anery in them, so that's something that I've liked. I prefer some of the golds and things within them. And it's just been, I guess, because it took me quite a long time to kind of get the group together. Um, kind of searching for this female, and then was just lucky enough to be able to get this one from Dave when he emigrated. They've been very much kind of a pet project in that regard, and yeah, I've just maybe at some point I will get some other locales. I've seen some really nice Madus recently that kind of fired me interest, but also as well, the knowing where they came from, knowing the import that they came in on. One thing I did try and do was to get the CITES paperwork, because I thought that would be something that would be really nice to have for them. And I kind of spoke to James Coppen, and at that point he was kind of out of Retics and couldn't find the original paperwork. I also approached the CITES people here in the UK and said, I know when these were imported. Can you provide this information, because I now have the animals? And they said, well, one, we don't keep records for longer than 5 years, and two, through the various GDPR or whatever it's called stuff, we can't, because you weren't the importer, we can't provide them to you. So I kind of drew a bit of a kind of a blank there, but I have been able to, I've got the sort of copies of the adverts when they were imported, and also documentation from Dave when he sold me the animal. So I've been able to kind of, as far as I possibly could, prove the provenance of them. I mean, obviously I didn't go to the island and collect them myself, but
Sure.
Right, but no one's doing that. So
no. But as far as I possibly could. So, I was pretty confident in the animals that I had, and they were, what I'm saying they are. So yeah, they've just been. I've just thoroughly enjoyed keeping them, and also you've seen that they're pretty easy to handle as well. They're and being small, don't take up an awful lot of space.
Yeah.
They've just been kind of really good. And at the moment, so I'd very much like to get an unrelated male, just to ensure that if my now somewhat aged males aren't up to the job anymore, then I've got someone that can step in.
I will say that sentiment does go quite a long way in keeping you focused in your projects. I know it has for me, so
yes,
it makes sense.
Oh, for sure. I'm hoping that I'm hoping you find a female that comes across for you too. I'd love for you to collect a second female.
Yeah, I mean the holdbacks I've got are, so they're two now. I mean I don't think, given their current growth rates, I don't think they're going to be breedable until they're 5, maybe 6.
Okay.
They are growing that much slower than kind of the morph stuff that I have here. But yeah, I'd just like to kind of get another male so that I feel secure in that. And yeah, now I'll certainly keep trying with the adults that I've got. It was probably no bad thing that the female missed a year last year, so she's feeding well now. So
it always works itself out, I think.
Again. I hope so. Yeah.
I'm rooting for you. I'm excited for it. Yeah, please send me pictures, send me updates.
Definitely, will do.
Yeah, I'm glad the lower temperature also worked out for you.
It did. Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a very good tip. It was. I think it definitely made a difference, and I guess it makes sense as well with it being such a small island. Then it's going to be cooler just because of the amount of sea around it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
True.
And again, it's heat kills, and cool just slows things down when it comes to incubation. So
yeah.
all right, John, I appreciate having you on. Thanks so much. We'll let you get some sleep if that's a thing right now.
Well deserved at this point.
Thank you, Noah. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you, man.
Likewise. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, Jon.
All right. Episode 140.
All right. Yeah.
One.
Another one in the books. I'll say, whether it be a week from now, 2 weeks from now, we will probably resume either a book club episode or just a good update episode for y'all. 3 years of doing the Retic Lounge, Lucas. This has been a wild ride, and I'm
it has.
No matter how much it slows down or whatever, I'm excited to continue the journey. Still, we have a good group of people behind us that thoroughly get a decent amount back from us, which I think is probably the coolest thing to see after 3 years.
Yeah,
I
agree.
The impact that we've been able to have in just what we saw as a small gap in the information market. So, yeah, guys, thanks for following along. Patreon, thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, thanks for the patience, everyone. See you.